Greetings from the east, the north, the south, and this wicked-ass west. The topic, black labor, white wealth. Again, black labor, white wealth. Here's the question. Why do you think black people are poor all around the world? Again, why do you think black people is poor all around the world? Let's get into it. I'm your host. I am the one. We'll let that music play on until you hear those three magical words. They are, stop the music. Okay, let's get into it. Let's stop the music. Yeah, stop the music.
Okay, let's get right into it. Why do you think black people are poor all around the world? And this is not only in America, but all around the world. The topic is from a book, Black Labor, White Wealth. Dr. Claude Anderson, I do believe that's his name. And he wrote Black Labor in the book, of course, Black Labor, White Wealth. Now, if you live in the inner city, you know what I'm talking about. The one common denominator in the inner cities is you have a lot of poor people. We may live in a house. We may rent an apartment. We may have the basic accommodations, but we are poor. When I say the word poor, I'm saying poor economically. Because if you make minimum wage, you're considered poor. If you make $5, $6, $7, $8 above minimum wage, guess what? You're poor. Because let the truth be told, minimum wage should be $8, $9, $10 above what minimum wage really is. So I don't even know the minimum wage today, but you should be making $8, $9 more from minimum wage, and that would be considered minimum wage. Now, here's the thing. Why do you think black people all around the world is poor? We can start here with America. Now, let's be real. We have self-destructed. We are at fault for our own personal self-destruction and our bad behavior. So I don't want to talk about that right now. I'm talking about why you think black people all around the world is poor, because our condition here in America is in dire strait, but all around the world, that could not be a coincidence. There's no way. I want to talk about the root cause of blacks being poor all around the world. And this is going to be a real quick video. Because you got, let me be nice, the powers that be, or the majority of the population, they'll tell you, oh, well, it's your fault. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and you'll be okay. And we'll say, well, we'll look at them. We'll say, hey, you took our boots, so I don't have no boots. So they'll say, well, get another job. You can get another job, but they will pay you just about the same, and they will treat you the same. And then you'll hear these good Christian white people. They will tell you, go back to Africa? This is the topic that I want to discuss today. It's going to be real brief. We have smartphones here. We have computers. All the information that I'm going to give right quick, you can look it up. I am not a historian. I am not educated. So those brothers and sisters that's educated, inform the ones about what I'm going to try to say here, because you know more so. You can speak more on this topic than I can. But coming from a person that's barely with a high school education, I can see this issue clear. I want to talk about 3 words today, right quick. One is called colonization. The second word is coup. It's spelled C-O-U-P, coup. And the next word, destabilization. Let's talk about colonization first. It's having control over indigenous people. And just to be in just layman terms, if you're from a country and you got a group of foreigners, they'll come in, they'll control all your natural resources and give you the pennies and the crumbs. So you've been colonized. Colonization is an area that will always keep indigenous people poor. Destabilization. When you go into an area and you destabilize it, so you can never really get on your feet simply because there's wars going on. There's always something happening that will cause you not to thrive, simply because you're being destabilized. It's almost like an earthquake. When you're having an earthquake, the room is shaking. You want stability. Once that earthquake is over, you become more stable. No, you don't become more stable. It becomes more stable. It's like a baby that's crying. You become destabilized and you go try to find out what's the problem. And when the baby calms down, things become stable. You get you get where I'm going with this. A rainstorm while you're driving. It's called destabilization. Rain pouring all over the place. You can't see. You want some stability. Like a woman to tell a man, get a job, keep a job. You ain't got a job. Get a job, keep a job. Why? If you got a steady job, you got steady income, and of course you become more stable. Those 3 words. Let's try to get to this thing. They'll tell you to go back to Africa. That's my topic. And they'll tell you, go back to Africa with a straight face. But you tell me to go back to Africa, but you won't leave Africa. Why? If you leave Africa, the Africans can go back to Africa and enjoy the fruits of the land. Now, I want you to remember, Africa is one of the richest continents on the planet, filled with natural resources. To name a couple, you got diamonds, gold, silver, uranium. It goes on, ivory. It goes on and on and on. Filled of natural resources. Here is why Black people all around the world will remain poor. It's because of that word coup, C-O-U-P. The European nations want the African nations to stay unstable. This plan that they always use, they use the same plan out of their same playbook. They'll destabilize a region. Therefore, if you constantly being under steady being destabilized, you can't get anything done. So they use destabilization in order to keep you off balance, and they will steal all of your natural resources. It happens here in America. Every inner city community here in America is destabilized. So, as a people, we can never grow because we're destabilized. Let me explain. Once you become stabilized, you can start being educated. You can start building wealth. But if you are always in a state of destabilization, you can never grow. Let me get to it. 1833 to like 1914, the good Christian Europeans went into Africa and they decided that they're going to split Africa up for themselves and take all of the natural resources. These European powers decided, hey, these people, they don't matter. So we're going to take all of their resources, we're going to take them, and we're going to charge them for their own resources. Keep them in a perpetual civil war, and they will never grow. So, as you hear in the news today, in Africa, there has been a coup after coup after coup. Some of the nations I'm going to name off the top of my head, I can't name. I know they destabilized so many nations. So once the nations are, it doesn't matter the name of the nations right now, but if you get my point, they'll destabilize the area and then they'll come in and take their natural resources. They will allow what they would call a civil war. And they'll come in as, I'm the good guy. We're going to clean it up. At the same time, they steal all your natural resources. So if you ever notice in Africa for the last 20, 30, 40 years, even beyond that, Africa has always been destabilized. And the French, I can't say enough about the French. How they go in, they'll steal all your natural resources. One of the places is Niger. Niger have so many resources that if they only sold their resources, they would become a stabilized, rich nation. But France, I wanted to use another name, they control 80% of the uranium. In other words, what I'm saying is they will illuminate France and other nations from Niger's resources, and they charge Niger for their own resources. This wicked plan of the Europeans have never stopped. Now, let me get to it. In between 1833 again and 1914, they had this thing, this agreement, and off the top of my head, I cannot think of what it is. I know it's called the Berlin Conference, and it was labeled the scramble. Yeah, the scramble for Africa. Okay. Let me get my notes ready. But the scramble for Africa. In other words, he went in. I think it started out with 9 European powerful nations. And they took Africa and they split it up for themselves. And they decide they're going to take all of their natural resources. They're going to take it. They're going to own 80, 90% of it. And then they're going to sell it back to the indigenous people and enslave them. If you know the history of France, that is a wicked land, along with every other European nation. But they're so wicked right now. If you know what's happening over in Haiti, after the Haitians won their independence, and the French charged them to this very day, they have to pay back in the billions reparations for the colonizer. Yet the people of the land receive nothing. That's why you see coup after coup after coup in every nation. Because, number one, they put in a puppet leader. So you put in a puppet leader, he and his family will remain rich. But the general population, the 90% remain poor. So you got to, let me break it down like this. You get a king. The king is super rich in his nation. The people, 90% are poor. So in other words, the European nations pay the king to sell his people out. He become rich in his nation. So to make it look good, well, look, this is a black on black thing. Blacks is doing it to blacks. No, behind the scenes, you got the Europeans taking all their natural resources and one person get rich. It's almost like the rappers today, the entertainers. They will pay these rappers an enormous amount of money to sell filth and dominate the minds of the youth. They'll pay a handful of people. They'll destroy the whole race, but yet they get paid. It's almost like the NFL. They hired Jay-Z to be over something over the league. So they put a black face on it, but the white billionaires is behind it. But in reality, there'll be no change. The only person that get paid is Jay-Z. Now, I'm not saying this happened to Jay-Z in itself. I'm just saying, I'm giving you an analogy of how it works. Now, probably in Jay-Z's case, it's probably working that way. But like I said, I don't know behind the scenes. I'm giving you an example of how one person get rich and everybody else remain poor. Now, it'll never negate the fact that we self-sabotage our own race. I'm not speaking about that right now. I'm saying why blacks will remain poor. Because you got these elite billionaires behind the scenes, and they're getting paid, and they'll pay a puppet leader to run the race straight to the ground. Now, if you don't know the history about King Leopold, look this devil up. This devil, and he's held in high regard today. And I think his grandsons is some type of ambassador. So look him up. He probably died in the early 1900s, King Leopold. So his family is still around. That same wicked spirit is still in the earth. Let me move on. When they steal the natural resources of a nation, this nation don't have a choice but to remain poor. They don't have a choice. And the blame will always go on the so-called crooked leaders. But in reality, there's always somebody behind the scenes pulling the strings. Because when you got a super rich nation, continent, and natural resources, and the people remain poor, there's a problem. There's a major problem. And the way the Europeans can do this is through their military might. Now, if you know those 9 nations that colonized Africa, I think it went up to, it's more than 13. I mean, it's more than 9. But the ones that come to mind, at first it started with 9. Now you got every European nation you can name got a hand in Africa. From number 1, they'll say France, Britain, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Germany, and that great nation that sit on many waters, good old big bad America, hides its hand, but it's got a big part in Africa, although it's not on paper, but America runs the whole world. So it has its hands in Africa, and therefore they want Africa to remain poor and broke. Now you ask the average American white person about reparations. And I made another video a while ago, and I said 99.9% are totally against reparations. I stand by that. On paper, they may say they'll take a vote, and they'll probably you'll probably get 30% of white people in government that say yes, but in reality, it's 99%. They can give you the 70% number if they want to. Okay. Here's something else. When the European nations, mainly America, when they put somebody in power, they put them in power to protect their interests. So you're talking about a country like Haiti. Haiti's leader will be handpicked by America to do the biddings. I mean, do the will of what the Americans want. If you don't do it, of course, they'll just, what's the word they use on YouTube? They'll delete you. They'll take you out of power. There was a guy in the 50s. I'm going to go out on a limb and I hope I get his name right. Patrice Lumumba. Now, we talked about King Leopold. So Patrice Lumumba was finally elected in a place where King Leopold wreaked havoc on, and that's the DRC, or the Democratic Republic of Congo. So he, through years, came up through the ranks. He gained power, and he was elected to be the president of the DRC. Okay, his interest didn't line up with the Europeans because he wanted his people to come up. And this is the way it worked for most of us that probably don't know this. If your interest is not in the interest of the European powers, they will delete you. So they killed him. Long story short, they killed him. There was a place in Guatemala, the same thing. The United Fruit, it was, I can't remember the name, but it happened in the 1950s. So the CIA, corporations, when corporations go into an area like that, they grew bananas. And they had a newly elected president, if I'm not mistaken. Well, they didn't agree with the policies of the corporations, which is really America. So it's happened in like the 1950s. The CIA under Dwight Eisenhower was the president at the time. They decided to remove the leader and put a leader in office that will align with their interests, as they put it. So if you don't align with their interests, they just kill you, or they just, promote propaganda in your country, destabilize your country, either remove you from office and you get to leave the country, or they'll just delete you. You got to go. Their interests. So, in other words, the interests of the people will never really be recognized simply because their greed come first. So when you see these African nations poor, and you wonder, hey, how can they remain so poor? They're so destabilized. Yes, they are, by design. Let's come to America, and I'm about to wrap this thing up. You will notice communities in this country, in the inner cities, it's the same tactic. They destabilize our communities. They'll fill it with 1, 2, 3. 1, they'll destabilize the family life. 2, drugs. 3, violence. Those 3 alone, you can never have a stabilized community with those three things. They pour drugs into the community. They'll put one group against another group. They call them gangs. You can name any gang name. These brothers and sisters are not against one another. They don't even know one another. But guess what? The same CIA tactic that they use overseas, they use in the black community. So therefore, we'll always remain poor and broke. Here's what happens. How do you spend your money? You can't spend your money in your community. Your community is destabilized. So you have to spend your money with them. You can't save money in your community to build your community. Why? You don't have a community to build. Matter of fact, you want to get out of your community. Why? Your community is destabilized. They say it take, and yes, my numbers are off. When money circulate in a community, it's supposed to stay there. Now, when black money is in black community, it probably take less than 15 minutes to leave. So the community can never be built. Now, just if you don't know what I'm talking about, talk to somebody. Money must stay in your community in order for your community to build. But we spend our money on everything but in our community. And all those businesses that's in our community, like the Chinese restaurant, the Arab stores or whatever, that money do not stay in the black community. That money leaves. It goes towards their families, their businesses, and every other thing. It don't stay in the black community. That's my point. So we will always be poor. And I'm not talking about on an individual basis. I'm talking about we will always be poor because it's called group economics. And Dr. Claude Anderson, in his book, Black Labor, White Wealth, he'll break that down because I'm not qualified to break that down. But what I do know is our community and our people will remain poor as a whole. Now, please don't say, well, I'm rich. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about as a whole. So that's all I got to say for this. I do believe the tape ran out. So let me get up out of here. That was my little rant for today. Okay. Again, I'm up out of here. Leave your comments, if you will. I am your host. I am the one.